Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Book. I'm here with my co-host, Karen McQuestion. How are you? How's Wisconsin?
Wisconsin is fine. I am fine. How are you over there in the Pacific Northwest?
We are good too. We actually had some sunshine over the weekend, and I swear it makes me feel like a different person. I wish that we could have a little more of it, but that's not what you get when you live there in Seattle.
Well, now you know why everyone retires down south.
Yes. Well, we have a great interview to share today. This was one of my all-time favorite guests, maybe because I love her books and I love the genre and everything, but she was fantastic.
I was really super excited. I had just finished reading her most recent novel, and I might have come off as a little bit of fangirling during the interview. I hope not.
No, you were good.
But I think, okay, good. I was sort of like, you know what I love about your books? She's such a lovely person.
Yes.
She was like, well, sort of, she was cool. But I really do. I love her fiction. I like it when you meet an author and then you find out that they're just the way you pictured they would be. And she certainly is just, a lovely woman and interesting and thoughtful and smart. And one thing that she said really struck home with me. We ask at the end, those are little fun questions. And one of them is, what's something you're really bad at? And she said, math. And I realized I don't know any writers that are bad at, or good at math, rather. Do you?
No, I can't think of any that would say they were. I mean, some might say, oh, I have a good business mind, but I've never heard anybody answer like, oh yeah, I just geek out on math. I love it. Like my husband, it's not a gift that goes together, math and writing. I wouldn't
writing
think.
Fiction.
Yeah.
Well, I always joke that the only time I'm good at math is when it's a percentage of my, when we're figuring out royalty rates for our books. It's like you put that dollar sign in front of it and suddenly I get a little bit better at it.
Yeah, it's more interesting when there's dollars attached to it.
Still not a strong suit, though.
No, definitely not. All right, well, let's send the listeners on their way to the interview. On with the show.
We are delighted today to have Susan Meissner speaking with us. Susan is a USA Today bestselling author of historical fiction with more than 750,000 books in print in 18 languages. She is an author, speaker, and writing workshop leader with a background in community journalism. Her many highly acclaimed novels include her most recent, The Nature of Fragile Things, which I just finished reading and absolutely loved, which earned a starred review in Publishers Weekly. A California native, she attended Point Loma Nazarene University and is also a writing workshop volunteer for Words Alive, which is a San Diego nonprofit dedicated to helping at-risk youth foster a love for reading and writing. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's truly my pleasure.
We're delighted you're here. Tell us about your path to publication. Did you always want to be a novelist?
I think I've always loved to write. I knew that from very, very early. My mom told me once that I was writing poems in the backseat of the car even before I could write. I was just reciting, like making up poems in the backseat of the car. So I think writing has always been my go-to for like a hobby and therapy. And I would pour out my teenage angst in poetry. And so I felt for a long time that writing was just that. It was really only my hobby. It wasn't something I wanted to make a career out of. And I think when I was making those choices that you have to make when you graduate from high school and the world is before you and you're supposed to make a decision, I thought, well, I don't want writing, which is what I love, to be something that I grow to dread. I saw too many people coming home from the work week tired, longing for Fridays and hating Mondays. And I mistakenly thought that if I made writing my career, that I would grow to hate it, which is not true. I've learned that you can do what you love. It can tax you, it can weary you, but you can still love it. So I didn't start my first novel until I was in my 40s, but I had thought about it for a long time.
If somebody is unfamiliar with your books, where do you suggest they start?
Well, I have a backlist that a lot of it's not in print anymore. It was my early stuff. And back then, I was writing for an inspirational house. A lot of those books are available on audio or digitally. But if they want to start with books that are still in print, they could maybe start with The Fall of Marigolds, which came out in 2014. And it was one of those books that kind of was a game changer for me. It was with a new publishing house, a bigger publishing house. I was in the general market now. And that book resonated with a lot of book clubs, and it continues to do so. I think it's the kind of book that people, when they read it, they want to talk to somebody about it afterward. It has a lot of themes that are just resonant themes, I guess you could say. So if they want to start with something in my past, I would suggest A Fall of Marigolds, or my most current one, which is The Nature of Fragile Things.
I find it interesting that you said it resonated with readers, and I always wonder, is there something you can pinpoint about that particular book that resonated with readers?
I hope it's because I've landed on a universal theme that kind of transcends time. There are things about us as humans that don't change from decade to decade, century to century, millennia to millennia. Our need for love and affirmation, our desire for justice, all of those things kind of tend to stay with us. And if I'm able to draw on one of those when I'm writing, it's going to resonate no matter what, because those things don't change. I also look for human relationships, because we're all in them. All of us are in some kind of human relationship, unless you're living on an island with nobody. And even then, you're going to have a volleyball to talk to. So I feel like if I've dialed into a universal theme and I'm talking about a human relationship that everybody can relate to, and if I include some sort of moral dilemma, it becomes a book where you wonder, what would I have done if that had been me? And if I can do all three of those things, that's my goal, is to hopefully connect with the reader that way, so that it does resonate. It does kind of echo after they've turned the last page.
I've never heard it expressed like that. I'm going to remember that. As I said before, I just finished reading The Nature of Fragile Things, which I just loved. The San Francisco earthquake of 1906 plays a big role. How do you go about doing research, and do you enjoy doing it?
I love the research part of writing historical fiction. It's actually the most fun thing about writing a book is the research. And the most hardest thing is starting the work itself. It's always hard to put the research away and start to write, because writing is hard. So research I love, and there's so many ways to go about it. There's never been a better time to be a writer in terms of research than right now, because there's so much at our fingertips. When I want to just start researching this book about the 1906 quake, there's any number of really, really good books written about it, all kinds of digital archives. I became a patron of the San Francisco Public Library just to be able to use their digital archives, and they have everything. So I never felt like I was at a loss. What I didn't have were eyewitnesses to talk to. I couldn't interview anybody. The event happened too long ago. Everyone has since passed. But I still found a book by a man who gathered all the firsthand accounts he could find, and he put them into one book. He kind of did my legwork for me, because he went to all the historical societies, and he dove into treasure troves of old diaries and letters and old newspaper clippings, and he just put together a book of personal firsthand accounts, which is always so helpful to have, like, the personal view of what it was like to live in that moment in time.
And I understand this is the first natural disaster in U.S. history that they have photographs of. Is that correct?
I have heard that to be true. So it must be true, because you've heard it, I've heard it, and it really was so early. And I have to believe that it must be true that it is the first one.
So we love to talk about how authors choose characters' names. And we're also wondering if you ever change them as you go along writing the story. And I would like to know how you came up with the delightful titles of your books, because they are just killer.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, as far as names go, because I write historical fiction, I do have some parameters. I have to kind of look to see what kind of names were being handed out back then. It's only been in the last 30 years that you see surnames becoming first names. That didn't happen before. It seems to me it would be disingenuous for me to give a female character the name Madison if they lived in 1910. That just did not happen. It's easy, though, to find out what were the most popular names in any given time, because census.gov has all of that. I usually start there, and I find a name that would have been easily given to a man or a woman who's living in that time that I like. Because there are some names from the past that they don't do anything for me. So I always pick a name that I wouldn't mind hearing or saying for the next several years, and especially during the writing process. It's got to be a name that I love, and that I think readers will love too. It's kind of sound nice on the ear, even if you're not listening to the book. It's got to rest easy on the ear. Can't be hard to say or hard to pronounce. That's just something for a reader to stumble over, and I don't want that. And as far as my titles, I spend a lot of time on those. So I'm glad to hear you say you like them. I almost always want them to be multi-layered. I don't want the title just to be, like The Girl Who Lived Next Door, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that title, but there's no layer to it, at least that I can hear or feel. And mine, I want them to feel like they work on several levels. So the nature of fragile things, point blank, the nature of something fragile is if you drop it, it will break. But not everything that looks fragile is. Some things that look quite fragile are actually rather resilient. And especially women at the turn of the century were seen as fragile creatures that needed a man for all the heavy lifting. And, they couldn't vote. They couldn't have their own bank account, but women have never been fragile. And so that was just an identity imposed on them, by society and culture. And of course, I want to turn that on its head. And I hope that I did in the book, because the women characters in this book are really quite resilient. And some things that are strong are really actually quite fragile. San Francisco was this beautiful, magnificent city, and it was toppled in 3 days by a quake and then a ravaging fire. And everyone thought it was a beautiful city that couldn't possibly be toppled in 3 days by anything. And so you kind of have that juxtaposition of what is fragile and what is not, and then the nature of those things.
And does your publisher or editor usually go along with your titles, or is there always some back and forth?
There's usually going to be a discussion about the title. Sometimes we all love it from the get-go, and everybody liked the title for this one, The Nature of Fragile Things. But like the book, 2 books before, As Bright as Heaven, which is a book about the 1918 pandemic, funnily enough, that one went through some title changes. Mainly it's because everyone has to agree on the title, but especially publicity and marketing in the sales department. And I get why the sales department kind of has the last say. They know the market. They're out there trying to sell the books, and they know which titles are going to grab buyers. I write for readers, but the sales department, they're looking at buyers, and they're the same, but they're different. And so I understand why they're thinking we need to have a title that a consumer will buy. And I'm looking to have a title that a reader will love. I get the consumer is probably the most important, because I can write a book that no one will buy. And who wants to do that? I'd rather write a book that a reader will buy. And if it means having a great title that I don't get to pick, then I'll go with it.
What does a writing day look like for you, a typical day? And do you outline your books ahead of time?
I do outline my books. I don't outline them in ink. I always say that I outline them in pencil. I'm not married to my outline. I'm just dating it. And it changes as I write. I feel like I outline by the seat of my pants, which is kind of a nice little balance between writing by the seat of your pants and outlining. So that I'll begin with an outline that kind of, it's a map of where I want to go, of where I think I want to go with this book, but it does change as I write. And I'm open to that intuitive process that happens as I'm writing, such that if I feel like the destination is changing, I'll just change my outline. I want to be going in a direction that doesn't feel like I'm meandering and purposeless. And I feel like an outline helps me do that. And then a writing day is usually a 2,000 word day. And so it doesn't matter if it takes me 3 hours or 13 hours. I want to write 2,000 really good words. And so on a writing day, I could be done by noon, or I could be still slogging through at dinner time and having to just say, I gave it my best, and I'll try and do better the next day. And not every day is a writing day. Like today, I'm talking with you fine people, and today's not a writing day. I'm revising today, and I don't have that pressure of having to write 2,000 words. So it's only when I'm in writing mode that I have that goal of 2,000 really good words a day. And I try to come down to my writing room around 9 a.m. I try to treat my job as a real job. I get dressed every day. I don't always have shoes on. A lot of times I'm still wearing slippers, but I change out of my PJs. I get into real clothes and I brush my hair, and I try and think of my job, which is just, down the hall from the kitchen, as a real job. And I'm usually at it by 9 a.m. And whenever I finish is dependent on how good of a writing day I've had.
There's something about the 2,000 words, it's Stephen King's goal too.
I think it must be like just doable. That's why so many of us have that as a goal. It's 10 pages, 10 or 12 pages, give or take. And it is doable. It's enough to get the book written. If you have a deadline set to you by your publisher, if you write 2,000 words a day, you will finish the book on time. If you have too few words a day, you'll get toward the end and you'll feel like you're rushing. And I don't want to feel that way. If I wrote too few, if I set a goal of only 500 words a day, well, that won't get the book written in the time frame it needs to be written.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd be rushing at the end. And that's the last place you want to rush.
And also, I think 2,000 words, you feel that momentum.
Mm-hmm.
So you're constantly building on it. So as opposed to trickling out little bits here and there.
Right. And 2,000 words is a good chunk of a chapter. It could be the whole chapter, which means that you've seen an action to its completion. Usually when we have a chapter ending, it's because it's a good place to stop and put a bookmark or whatever. And if you do 2,000 words, you've usually completed either some kind of action or reaction.
Have you ever been discouraged during the writing or publication process?
Oh gosh, all the time. Yeah, writing is hard work, creativity. I guess for some people it comes easier than for others, but I feel like the more I write, the harder it gets, which I was not expecting when I took this gig on. I think I thought that the more you do something, the easier it becomes. Like if you become a swimmer, well, the more you swim, the better you become at swimming and the easier those 10 laps are to do. But writing is different. I feel like every time I begin a new work, I start with the same nothing. You start with a blank page with no words on it. And I always raise the bar when I start a new work. I want it to be better than the one before it. So I feel like I start a new book with nothing, and its result is so far off in the future and exalted and so far above my head, it seems a little daunting. And I've written, my last 2 books have been hard to write. I could blame it on the pandemic, but I don't think that's what it is. I just feel like these were hard to write. They took me to the mat and I had some false starts, and it made me feel a little bit like I was like new, like it was my first rodeo and it wasn't. So that was surprising to me. I know it can happen now. It won't surprise me when it happens again. Now I know that just because you do something for 20 years doesn't mean that the 21st year it's going to seem like a breeze. That's just not the case. And of course, the best thing you can do when something challenges you is meet the challenge, is find a way to meet the challenge. You might have to develop some new coping skill or some other type of skill, but the best way is to find a way to meet it. And then publishing itself is something that no writer can control. You can only control how the quality of the book that you write. And then once it's in the realm of the publishing world, it really isn't in your control anymore. You can participate in the publicity and the marketing and do your best on social media platforms and all of that, but you can't make people buy your book, and you can't make people follow you, and you can't make them engage with you. Those are all things you can't make happen. So I always say, do your best and leave the rest. There's no point in getting uptight about things you can't control.
Words to live by, that's for sure. Easier said than done, though, sometimes.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
This next question, I think you answered it a little bit when you said research is the part that you really love. But what parts of writing fiction do you find the most difficult?
Lately, it's been executing my idea, which I thought would be a problem I would have in the very, very beginning. But it's actually becoming harder to execute. And I think it's because I don't want to do the same thing I've done before. So I feel like I need to look at new ways to execute an idea. That has been a struggle lately. Is I'll have a good idea and I'll begin and I'll realize, like maybe 20 or 30,000 words in, well, this isn't working. And then I'll have to start over again, which I didn't have to do in the beginning. It might be too that the parts of your job you find difficult change from year to year. And right now it's how to execute it the best way. With The Nature of Fragile Things, I had to start 3 times. And the book I'm writing now, I've had to start 3 times. And each time I had to kind of revisit how I was going to execute it. In the end, I think it's going to, in both cases, it's going to mean a better book. But that part has not been fun. Yeah.
So when you say execute, do you mean the way it's structured, like point of view or?
Yeah, even all of that, right? Because point of view,
Okay.
yeah, point of view is part of the structure. And with The Nature of Fragile Things, when I first started out with that book, the characters, there's kind of 3 main female characters, but one prominent one. Well, when I first began, I had all 3 women with their own point of view chapters, and it wasn't working. And I didn't realize that until I was like almost halfway into it, like 50,000 words. And I realized that, wow, this is not working. And I had to figure out why wasn't it working. It's really all dialing back to what does the main character want and why does she want it? And once I got back to like the very, very basics of a good story, I realized, oh, well, this is just Sophie's story, only hers. So the other characters still come into the story, but she's telling it first person point of view. And it took me 2 other tries to realize it was her story to tell. And so that was like how to execute the book was it should have been from the beginning. Sophie's story, Sophie's point of view.
And so, not to belabor this, but I'm just curious, you said you hit 50,000 words, which for our listeners is a lot of words. It's like half a book. Did somebody tell you it wasn't working, or did you just inherently know?
No,
Was it
I didn't.
intuitive?
I didn't know.
Oh.
I really thought I was onto something. My editor, who's amazing, I owed her with the first attempt, which I wasn't like in love with, but I thought it was okay. When I sent that to her, I owed her progress materials, which is what they ask for. When you sign a 2-book contract and you don't know what you're going to write for that second book, they don't care. They already know you're good for the first one. They'll just say, well, the second book we'll call Untitled, and we don't know what it's going to be about, but you will send us progress materials like at the 5-month mark or whatever. So I owed them progress materials because this was a book that they had not contracted for in content, just that they wanted a second book. And so I sent her those first pages, like 20,000 words. And she's the one who told me this is not going to work. And she had a lot of really great reasons why. So then I started over again with these characters, the ones that are actually in the book, but not with just Sophie telling the story. And that's when I had written more because I did have the best idea now, but I wasn't executing it right. The construction wasn't right. And she knew, my editor knew. So she never told me this is what you need to do. She just said, this is not working. And then she had a bunch of reasons why. So it was me going back to like the very basics of storytelling and saying, well, what is the story I'm telling here? What does Sophie want? And why does she want it? And when I finally just dialed it back to that, that's when I knew that it was just her story to tell. But it was my editor that pointed it out.
Well, that's a good segue into my question. When do you share a work in progress? Like at what point do you share it with your editor, and then do you share it with early readers, or how does that process work for you?
Yeah, every author, I suppose, is different on this. I don't share it with anybody. I don't like anybody to see it. I kind of feel like I go into a cave, and the only person that sees it before I turn it in to my editor is my mom, and only because she's a really good proofreader. And I feel like if I have a clean manuscript to turn in to my editor with not a lot of grammatical, mechanical things, then she's not going to stumble over that. She's just going to be reading the story, which is what I want her to read. And so my mom will help me get it all cleaned up, and then I'll send it. But I've never been in a writer's group. I've never been in a critique group. I don't send anything to anybody. I'm not sure exactly why, other than the fact that I know that it's not finished. It's not perfect. It's not ready. It would be like, taking a cake out of the oven and trying to cut off a piece and saying, can you try my cake? It's not done yet, but can you just try it? Let me know. It's like, well, no, not a cake. No. And so nobody sees it.
Not a gooey in the middle cake.
No.
And it's really not indicative of what the cake will be.
Oh, yeah. But I do have friends, on the other hand, who have writing partners, like critique partners, and they'll send each other their chapters as they go. And kudos to them for being able to do it that way. I just don't think I could do that.
So how do you know when a book is done? I mean, I know when you type the end, it's done, but when you feel you've fully realized the vision you had for the story.
Well, for me, since I outline, I know where I want to end up. So if you get there, you're done.
And then you have cake.
Yes, and then you have cake. That sounds like a great plan. So, what I don't like in a book is when you feel like you're coming in for a landing, and then the author never stops taxiing down the runway. It's just like, when you land the plane, your passengers, they want to get off, they want to get their luggage, and they want to go home. And so for me, if I've landed the plane, then I want to have a really tight denouement or a really nice way of tying everything up. And I want my readers, my passengers to feel like that was a great flight. And so that's how I want them to feel. And so I've already envisioned their destination, where they're going to land. And so I can usually tell when I'm there. What I struggle with is my parting thoughts. Like you want the book to part in ways that feels very kind of conclusive or insightful or poignant or memorable. That might take a while to figure out how to say it, but I know where they're going to end up.
Do you keep a list of story ideas as you think of them?
I kind of have, it's not really an idea file. It's more like a, this interests me file. So I'll read something in the paper or a magazine or online. And if it moves me, if it makes me think, oh, I think there might be a story in there, or oh, I could maybe create a story using that location as a backdrop. If it's online, I'll print it out, because sometimes links go away. I'll print it out and put it in my file. And so when it's time to, choose a new story idea, I've usually got a huge file of just little things that really don't have anything in common with each other than they sparked an idea in my head. Like, for example, I subscribe to the Sunday New York Times, and there is a column that appears every Sunday called Modern Love. And it's always an article written by somebody out in the real world, like you or me, and they're writing an essay about some kind of relationship that involves love. It's often spouse. Sometimes it can be, other kinds of relationships with other humans. But I save the ones that really interest me, because I would never steal somebody's story, but just the basics of what they said might interest me. Like a woman who goes to a grief support group to get over the loss of her husband, and ends up finding love again. Like that could happen to somebody in the Modern Love column, and I'll think, oh, I like that, and I might clip it out and just put it in my file as a way of thinking, there are ways to love again. And it might happen in surprising ways. That might be like the basics of the idea. So that's my file. So it's not really a file of ideas as much as it's a file of just little things that interest me.
So a lot of our listeners are aspiring authors or beginning authors. Is there a writing book that you could recommend to them?
There's lots of really great books out there. And I think I probably change the one I recommend from time to time. Right now, I would say, for a really interesting look at how to create a novel, because I write fiction, to create a novel that has appeal, like reader appeal, that you could almost imagine it like a movie. Like you could almost see Netflix picking it up and saying, we want to make a series out of your book, is to read Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. Save the Cat is a book for screenwriters. It's not for novel writers, but all a screenplay is a novel in 120 pages. Screenplays are stories that have to happen in a much shorter time frame. And every good movie is just a story on the screen that you have to be able to tell in under 3 hours. And so there are a lot of things about the story on the screen and a story in the pages is exactly the same. And that is having characters that your reader or your viewer are going to care about, a goal that makes sense and is relatable. They need to have weaknesses and strengths. They need to be surrounded by other people, the other cast of characters that they can bounce their ideas off of or be opposed to. And all of that happens on a screenplay as much as it happens in the pages of a book. And so Blake Snyder's book, Save the Cat, I think is a really good one to use.
I would second that.
Mm-hmm.
I really think it's helpful, especially in what you talked about before with structure, which is kind of something I think a lot of people struggle with in the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. Well, structure is, there are a lot of different ways to tell a story. And many, like you can't say, well, this is what a house looks like. I mean, how many different ways are there to build a house? It's like there are many Thousands. And so, and stories are the same way. There could be any number of ways of telling the story that you're going to set out to tell, but one structure is going to be the best one. And sometimes it's hard to find.
What other writing advice would you offer to aspiring authors, aspiring writers?
Well, I would say involve yourself in some sort of writing community, either online or in your hometown. Get around other writers. Other writers inspire you, they encourage you, they compel you, and you do the same for them. You're a writer too. So what other writers do for you, you do for other writers. That's always helpful. So get involved in some sort of writing community. If you really want to be serious about your writing, and especially if you write fiction, is don't read fluff. If you need recreation, if you need to get away from heavy stuff, then, watch the Brady Bunch on the TV network or something. But when you're reading, read just the good stuff, really good works, books that are either critically acclaimed or literarily, the prose is beautiful, because I feel, my own personal opinion is, whatever you read, you're feeding your writing muscle. You're feeding the muscle you use to write with what you read. So don't read fluff. You can get fluff other places. You can get entertainment for just plain entertainment value in other places, but don't get it from what you read.
Do you have an ideal reader in mind as you're writing, the person who's on the other end of your story?
Well, I write for the book club person. So I like to write books that book clubs like. And most book clubs are made up of, the people could be completely different from each other, but they love a good story. Mm-hmm. And they love a story that makes them think about what they value, that makes them ponder what they're afraid of and what they would do for love and what they would do for justice. That kind of book is the kind of book I like. I like book club books. That's what I like to read, is book club books. And so I would say my ideal reader is someone who's in a book club and really, really enjoys it.
One of the great things about your stories, your books, is that you layer in the information, the historical information, as part of the story. So there's never an info dump. Mm-hmm. And I learned so much when I read your books. It's almost like I absorb it because I'm just so caught up in the story. But then later I'll find myself talking about it to someone else and say, did you know that? I'm sure I'm tiresome, but I just love that. So I just wanted to give you a shout out for that, because that's something I just really admired.
Thank you. It takes effort to only put into the book what tells the story. Because if you do the research, I usually know about 10 times more than what actually gets into the book. So thank you. It's always a balancing act to make sure that what goes into the story is just for the story and not to show off.
Or that you're just so interested in it yourself. Because I write historical fiction too, and you're like, I can't believe that happened. I need to figure out how to put this in here. Exactly. All right. So on those days when you're not feeling the muse, what do you do?
I think it's okay to allow yourself some days where you're just, you need some times of refreshment. If I have to write that day, I don't know why, but a long walk, just there's something about going outside and taking a walk. And I'm not really divorcing myself from where I'm at in the story. I really am thinking about the story as I'm walking, and really good ideas often come to me when I'm walking that did not come to me when I was sitting in my chair. So if I have to write, that's what I'll do, is I'll go for a walk and I'll just kind of just wait and see if just being out away from the desk. I'm not sure why it works that way, but for some reason it does seem to open a door that was closed when I was in my writing room. But if I can take a day off, if I just need a day, then I'll just take it. And it's nice when you write 2,000 words a day. You usually have margin for days where you don't have to write and can give yourself a little day off.
Is there a book that you'd like to write, but you haven't yet for some reason? Maybe it's a different genre, or it hasn't percolated enough in your mind yet?
I don't know. I don't know if there's any. If there is, I'm not aware of it. Sometimes I'll read children's books, or I'll buy children's books for my grandchildren, and I'll think, oh, wouldn't that be fun to write a children's book? But I don't have an idea for one. So it's not like I don't have one like that's just waiting to be written. I think it's just the idea that I could write a book like that that a kid would love. I think it's just more of a pipe dream than anything else. So right now I'd have to say there isn't anything waiting in the wings for me. I don't have an idea that I haven't wanted or couldn't go for.
What is the most gratifying thing about being an author for you?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Well, I think there's something to be said about leaving a legacy. Writers can have their voices heard long after they've passed. If you go into a bookstore or a library and you see all the names of the writers from like the early 20th century, well, they're gone now. Steinbeck is gone, Hemingway is gone, Michener is gone, but their books are still there. And the classics will be there always. And for people like me, I don't know if we'll ever be considered classics, but I think my books will last a little bit longer than I will. I kind of hope they will. And that's encouraging, especially if I felt like I said something that was worth remembering. I think the idea that a writer's words can extend past the writer's life is pretty cool.
Now, here's a question we always ask, and most people answer one way. We'll see what you have to say about it. Does your family read your books?
Well, if we're being honest here, my husband does. He's great. My husband reads my books. But we have 3 sons, and I don't think they do. We're empty nesters, and they're all in their 30s, and they have lives, and they would probably not pick up a book club book that was written probably for female readers. So I don't pressure them to read my books, and it's totally okay with me that they don't. I'm fine with that. But I don't want to ask. I don't want to embarrass them, so I don't ask them. But my daughters-in-law, they read my books, and my father-in-law reads my books. This is really kind of cute. He's 97 years old, and he reads my books.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's so cool.
yeah, it is. It's sweet.
Yeah.
I'd say you're way ahead of most of the authors we interviewed.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say, Tess?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So how consumed are you with the story when you're in the middle of writing a book?
It gets worse the closer I get to the end. Like my husband knows now not to ask me anything important when I'm in the home stretch, because even though I'm not writing 24 hours a day, when I get up from the desk at the end of a writing day, I really haven't left the desk. So I'm kind of still in the world of the book, even though I'm upstairs making dinner or whatever. He knows now that if I have that distant, faraway look, he knows I'm not really there. But that really only happens toward the end. And I'm kind of glad for that. I wouldn't want to be in that kind of fog all the time. But toward the end, I feel like it's really hard to step away mentally. And I think that's okay, because when you're writing the end, there's a lot that goes into wrapping things up. And I'm okay with kind of just being mentally in the book for the whole time.
I think I know the answer to this one, but we'll see if I do. Who has been your biggest supporter as you built your craft and career?
There have been several people that have had like an outside influence on me. I have my mom is wonderful she really is. She's amazing about encouragement, and not just proofreading, but she's like my number one fan, and very, she's proud of me, and that says a lot. And I have an English teacher from my high school days, my 9th grade English teacher, who's also in his 90s, who I've been able to reconnect with. And he had a profound effect on me when I was 14 years old when I had him as a teacher. We're talking 50 years ago. And he had an effect on me. But really, for lasting day to day, it'd be my husband, Bob. He's my best friend, and he's been my champion from the beginning. And he's not a part of this world. He's not part of the writing world. And so he doesn't get everything, but he's always been like a cheerleader for me. And even when I come to him and I say, this has happened, and he has no idea what I'm talking about, he'll say, oh, that's too bad. What can I do? And so I really appreciate that about Bob.
Are you working on anything new right now that you can share with us?
Yeah, I'm actually working on 2 things at once, which I don't usually do, and I don't recommend, and I don't know if I'll do it again. But I'm working on a collaboration with 2 other historical novelists, and we've had a great time working together. It's Christina McMorris, who wrote Sold on a Monday, and Ariel Lahan, who wrote I Was Anastasia and Codename Helene. They're terrific friends, really good writers. And we've written a book, the 3 of us together, called When We Had Wings. It comes out in October of this year, and it's a World War II book about 3 military nurses who are stationed in the Philippines in World War II. And the Philippines was an American territory, just like Hawaii was. And after Pearl Harbor was bombed, the Japanese forces turned and headed for Manila, and they bombed it. And not only did they bomb it, but they set out to occupy, and they did. So the Philippine Islands fell. General MacArthur left, promised to be back. But when he left, there were a whole bunch of American servicemen left there, including Army and Navy nurses who were female. So they're female uniformed nurses that were working at the Army hospital there and the Navy hospital there. And so they underwent the same kind of terrible, horrible conditions that the male prisoners of war suffered. And they were just incredibly brave women. And even though they had faced all the same hardships and deprivations as the men, they still did what they went into the services to do, and that is to nurse people. So they were nursing people in these prisoner of war hospitals, if you can even call them that, with nothing. So they were treating people with malaria and beriberi and all kinds of other diseases and injuries with practically nothing. They're just amazing women. We fictionalized 3 of them, but they're real people. There's 80 Army nurses and a dozen Navy nurses who were prisoners of war for 3.5 years in the Philippines. And they're just remarkable women. So their story is going to get told.
Wow. I can't wait for that one. That sounds amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it sounds absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And then do each of you, when you're co-writing with 2 other authors, do you each take a character? Is that how you?
That's how we did it. Mm-hmm. So I have a Navy nurse, and Ariel wrote an Army nurse's story, and Christina wrote a Filipina nurse's story who was working for the American Army. And because the occupation of the Philippines separated all of them, so they were friends. We start out the story all together. They're friends in Manila, even though they're stationed at different hospitals. And then, of course, the war comes and they don't see each other. And so the rest of the book was rather easy to write because they spent so much time apart. The times where they were together, like there was a point in time when my Navy nurse and Ariel's Army nurse were in the same POW camp for like 9 months. And so for those couple of chapters, we had to write back and forth on a Google document, kind of, writing together. And then they were separated. And so then I could just go off and write my chapters alone again. So the only time we really had to work together on the chapters is when the nurses were together, which was the very, very beginning. A few little places in the middle of the war, not very many, and at the end.
Okay, we are now to the fun extra question portion. And I hesitated because for some reason I was thinking it was Karen's turn, but it's my turn. So I'm gonna ask you some questions, and just whatever you come up with is totally fine. They're not really writing related. What is one food that will never get past your lips?
Good and plenty. I hate black licorice. I won't eat it. Don't like it.
My husband hates it too.
I just don't like it.
Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Someone told me once that I sort of resemble Laura Dern, and I think she's a little bit younger than me. So, and she's a fantastic actor. So I would say, yeah, Laura Dern. She can play me.
What superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
Yeah, I would like to be able to be anywhere I want with just a blink of an eye. I don't want to time travel that much. I don't think I would enjoy that like I think I would. But I would like to be able to, like, if I just want to see my grandchildren in North Carolina, I just want to be able to flip a switch and I just go there, Or if I just want to go have lunch in Paris, just want to be able to blink and go have lunch in Paris and then come back home. So I'm not sure what that superpower is called, but that's what I want.
What's your biggest guilty pleasure?
Everything that I find pleasure in, I don't feel any guilt about. So I don't know. I feel like everything that I really enjoy, I wouldn't have any trouble recommending to other people. So I love bread. I eat a lot of bread, and I probably shouldn't, but I don't feel guilty about it. So I would say right now, I feel like everything that I enjoy, I completely recommend.
What's the worst job you ever had?
Oh, I worked for one day on an assembly line. Yeah, one day. I didn't like it.
If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
I want to be a violinist. I've always wanted to play the violin. I think I'm too old now to pick up something so beautiful. And probably don't have the time that requires to become a master at the instrument. But yeah, if we're just talking wishes, I would love to be able to be an expert on the violin.
What's your favorite smell?
There are so many really, really special ones. It's hard to pick just one, but I'm a native of Southern California. It's my home. It's where I grew up. And I've lived other places too. And we just happened to be back in Southern California. And there's nothing like the smell of orange blossoms. I don't know if you've smelled it before, but it's pretty amazing. And there's nothing really quite like the smell of orange blossoms. And when they first burst, we have several orange trees on our property. When they first burst, it's like the whole atmosphere around you is scented with perfume. It's really beautiful.
What is the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
I'm not very brave, so I haven't done very many terrifying things. I don't often put myself in the position of doing anything truly terrifying because I always step back from danger. I'm serious. There was one time when I was 16 years old, I went on a roller coaster that went upside down. That was a huge deal for me. Gigantic, huge. I look back on that moment as I really crossed a bridge. And my friends were riding it multiple times that day. I rode it once, and I was so proud of myself. And the other thing I did once with my daughter is we went kayaking in La Jolla, which is a really beautiful cove here in San Diego. And we were with a group, but kind of on our own at the same time. And we looked down below and we were kayaking over a school of leopard sharks. It's the kind of shark that is not too deadly. They've got a really, really small mouth. So they don't normally attack humans because their mouths are so small, but still.
Yeah,
It was a school of them. It was a school of them. And it was beautiful. We were amazed, but we're like, nobody rock this thing, dump us into the ocean because it was amazing, but it was a little terrifying too.
Yeah,
a little close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's one thing you're really bad at?
I'm really not good at math. I'm not. I can get by now as an adult with what I need to, and every phone now has a calculator, but I'm just not good at it. I've come to terms with that. I had to take algebra twice in high school because the first time I took algebra, I got a D and I just couldn't live with that. So I took it again in summer school and finally got the A that I had to have. And I never took another math class ever again, except in college when I had to take bonehead college math because I didn't score high enough on my SAT. And then no more math after that. None, zero, zilch, no more math.
If you could live your life over again, would you want to?
I don't think so. I can't think of one reason why I would want to relive my life. You might think, well, maybe I could make different choices, but the choices I made gave me the life that I had. So I think that would be truly terrifying, really.
Yes,
to go back and do it over again. I wouldn't want to know if I would choose differently. If I had the knowledge that I have now, I can't imagine doing it over again. Yeah.
All right. Well, that sums everything up. We're so happy that you had time to come on and speak with us. I know the listeners are going to love this one.
Oh, well, thank you. It was really
Susan.
fun. Thanks for having me.
Oh,
All right.
such a thrill.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and post a question in the comments section. This has been Behind the Book.